Hello and welcome to another My NT&D marriage video. I wanted to talk about something that has worked with my husband and myself. It's important to share the things that have worked, obviously, because other people may be able to implement them and potentially improve their marriages as well. There's this Destiny's Child song, I just want to praise you. And I remember hearing that song and thinking, yes, that's how I feel. And when we first got together, I did a lot of that. I was often complimenting him on his appearance and his achievements. You look nice in that shirt, I love your smile, I love your laugh. You've done well to have your own house, you're doing so well with your job. You know, I like your work ethic, things like that. And he was kind of, not really taking it in and not really complimenting me back. In fact, he spent a lot of time focusing on the negatives, and we had to have quite a number of conversations throughout the relationship of me reminding him what the positives were. And I'm not sure how common that is, though I have heard it is one of the typical Aspie traits, is to sort of be a little bit on the pessimistic side. So he was like that. He focused a lot on the negatives of the relationship, and I was focusing a lot on the positives and giving him compliments. And in the early years, it was easy to compliment because we were still new. I had wanted and needed compliments from him, but wasn't really getting them. And that never stopped me from complimenting him. I still kept going anyway. In the middle years, it got really difficult for the both of us to want to compliment each other. We were having so much conflict and so many unresolved arguments and unresolved issues, and he was constantly saying to me, you never listen to my recommendations, when really he was just trying to bully me into doing everything his way. And I was trying to be independent and fight back and try to still stay a semblance of who I am. So we were really clashing at this stage. Lots and lots of arguments, him yelling a lot, him critiquing a lot, me trying to stand up for myself. It definitely got to a point where even if one of us had complimented the other, which was rarely happening at that stage, neither of us would have felt it. You know, if he'd said to me, say, I love your smile, I'd be like, I don't care. What smile? The one we never see because we have so many arguments and I feel sad and unhappy and hardly ever smile. That smile? So it was very, very, very sort of ugly in those middle years, and complimenting and such probably wouldn't have done much anyway. These days I've realised that the praise that I was giving him isn't the praise that he wanted. Recently I said to him, remember all those years ago when I was praising you about this and that and yada yada? I said, what did you think about that? And he said, well, I never really paid it much attention. And I said, yeah, it kind of showed, because he was very much like, anytime I gave him a compliment. He didn't get that sort of, you smile and your head gets big and you feel really good about yourself and, he was like, I heard you, but whoop-de-doo. And it turned out that it wasn't the praise that he wanted to hear. Now, I would never have known that, and of course he wouldn't have known it either. And we had several counsellors telling us the praise and the compliments have to outweigh the critiquing and the insults. I mean, really you shouldn't be insulting your partner at all. But complaints and requests and such, things like that, you really have to outweigh it all with saying nice things to each other. And we were hearing this from a lot of counsellors and finding it very difficult to implement, of course, in those middle years when we're not getting along. And then in the later years when there's so much resentment and you hardly want to compliment each other because you've got all this history, this bad negative history. Anyway, we did eventually start. And it started with simple things like I would do the dishes and he would say, "Thanks for doing the dishes." And I didn't particularly like being complimented for activities around the house. I'm a stay-at-home mum. Doing housework is kind of my job. So for me, being complimented on that, it's not really my love language. I would prefer him to compliment me as an individual, my achievements, how I'm dressed, if he likes my smile, things of that nature. Whereas he, on the other hand, he beams when I praise him for doing things around the house, and it turns out they're the praises that he wanted and needed. He likes being thanked for helping out around the house, for doing his part, having that acknowledged. Here I am doing a good job around the house, fixing light bulbs and other such things, and if you notice that, then I'm happy. And so, for example, we were having a barbecue recently, our first gathering in 3 odd years, maybe more. It's been a while. COVID obviously got in the way. And he'd revamped the alfresco to make less seating. And my first thought when I saw it was, oh, this is never going to do. We don't fit as many people in. But I didn't say that, and I didn't lead with that. I said to him, I like what you've done over there with the flowers on the table. It looks really good. And he beamed. He was just, you could see he was just feeling so proud of himself and his effort. A little while later I said to him, let's just move this a little bit so we can fit some people in. But I led with the compliment and, well, I'll say praise really. I think that there's a difference between compliments and praise. Tell me what you think. But I led with praise, thanking him for doing something. And that's helping. We're not sort of fighting as much these days. He's noticing and at least acknowledging that I'm doing housework. And as I said, it's not really what I want to be complimented about. However, I certainly don't want to be critiqued about it, which is what he had been doing for years. He was always pointing out some random things that I hadn't done and not paying attention to all the things that I had done. So now that he's saying, thanks for helping out with the dishes, good job with the vacuuming, you've done a marvellous job with the bathroom, things like that, at least he's showing that he's paid attention to the things that I have done, and that, all over in general, it's just helping the relationship. We're fighting less now because there's less insults. I mean, let's be honest, I was obviously fighting over the insults because who wants to be insulted? And so now we're praising each other, and it's really, like at first it was like he praised me and, okay, But after some years, we've been implementing this for about 4 years now, it's starting to have a positive effect. We're at less loggerheads with each other, and it helps him feel appreciated and respected. And we often hear stories about how people on the spectrum are raised to feel a bit negative about themselves. They may be ostracised, they may be picked on by their parents. There's all this sort of negativity going on for them around who they are and what their personality type is. And so obviously the counteracting of that is praise, and then they get to feel better about themselves because they're getting complimented for who they are instead of negged for who they are. So I'm finding that within our relationship it is making a difference. So if you are one of those people, don't lead in with the negative. I'll share a story, for example. I have a friend who's got a partner who may or may not be on the spectrum, and they were clearing out their room together, their cupboards, emptying clothes, that sort of thing. And she'd stepped out for a while to go and do whatever and came back, and he'd gone off on his own little tangent and done something she hadn't liked or wanted or needed or whatever it was. So she's walked in with that kind of negative tone and that negative voice and starts telling him off. Why have you done that? I didn't want you to do that, blah, 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 blah. And he was instantly in defense mode, and then they got into an argument about it. And when she was telling me this, I said, oh, I can see he wanted some praise for what he'd done. And this is actually long before my husband and I were praising each other. I had just seen that in that situation. I could see where that guy would have felt really crappy about that response because he was attacked. And it wasn't even said in a nice way or a respectful way or even an understanding that he was trying to achieve something good, even if he had done the wrong thing in her eyes. Anyway, so that's one story of how negging can have a bad effect on your relationship. And speaking of praise, I have been asked a question, how to get your husband, I say husband, but it may be wives as well. And in fact, I think that there's neurotypicals who are in this category as well. I don't think it's a neurodiverse thing. But how to get your partner to tidy up and help around the house. Now, admittedly, my partner is not like that. He's a neat freak like I am. It's one of the things that ironically attracted the both of us to each other. I'd gone into his house, it was neat. He'd come into my house, it was neat. We liked that about each other. So he's the opposite. He's more of a critiquer. If anything's out of place. So he's not so much one to start a task and leave it undone. Although there are some small situations like that. For example, we had a hole in our ceiling. He put some downlights in, put a hole in the wrong spot, and then left it for years, just left it. And I never really cared, you know, it was there, we all saw it. I just figured he'll get around to it eventually. One day we had a plasterer come over who was plastering other things, and he said, have you got anything else you want me to plaster? I said, I have, as a matter of fact. I pointed him to the ceiling, and the ceiling's been plastered. It still now needs to be sanded and painted, but, you know, it's there, sitting there waiting. And it's not a big deal to me because it's out of the way. And if anybody sees it and makes a critique, whoopee-doo, I'm sure you've got things in your own house you need to focus on, so don't worry about that. I'm not easily offended by what people think, and so I kind of don't sweat the small things. There are some larger things that have been somewhat neglected. Well, then again, maybe not so large because obviously it's not affecting us very much. But for example, we have a outside laundry light that is broken. So if you go outside in the night time to bring the washing in, you're doing it in the dark. And you might be stepping in dog crap and whatever else. There's nothing you can do about it, you can't see. And I've said to hubby, you need to replace the light because he knows which light it is and how to do it, and I don't. And it's been like that for years, like literally years of walking out in the dark. And I mean, not that we bring clothes in the night time often anyway, which is why it's left, because it's not a major thing. But also the shower. So as I said, I'm a stay-at-home mum, a stay-at-home wife, so majority of the work falls to me. That being said, I don't and won't do everything. I think that we all run this place. We all contribute to the mess. We all need to tidy up after ourselves. It cannot just be one person's job, whether I'm stay-at-home or not. There are things that I'll do that are specifically mine, like all of the dusting, for example. Nobody ever dusts but me. However, we have an ensuite, and that ensuite's got a bath, a toilet, a shower, and 2 vanities, one for him, one for me. I do the whole bathroom. And I just sort of thought to myself recently, why am I doing the whole bathroom? I need some help. It's such a huge task. So I handballed him the shower. I said, I'll do everything else in the bathroom, the vacuuming, the dusting, the mopping, the washing, everything. You just do the shower. And he says, yeah, no problem. That's maybe 6-8 months ago. And let's just say that the shower is looking a bit, how's your mother? He'll get to it eventually. And because it's not a shower that we share with the outside world, it's not a stress to me. I will do the main bathroom where visitors use. But this one, I mean, it's not terrible, don't get me wrong, but it's not being cleaned often. He's kind of spacing those cleanings out, you know. And again, I don't care. You do you, I'll do me. I'm not going to stress about it. I've got the rest of the bathroom to do. I'm doing my bit. I'll leave it at that. So there are some things that he won't do or doesn't do or takes his time to do or does them sort of less frequent than I would. But I really don't stress the small things. It's main things that would bother me. And as I said, he's not the kind of person where he'll start a task and then not finish it. However, the question is, how would I get somebody, if I was in that position, to do stuff? So this is tricky because I can't speak for what will work for others. I did live with a housemate for 3 years, some years back, and he was sloth. Everything that he owned was everywhere around the house. On the benches, in the kitchen, on the lounge room floor. I mean, the place was a schmozzle. You could barely walk through the front door without tripping over something he'd left. And I tried so often to get him to tidy up after himself, and he just didn't. So eventually, because I refused to pick up after him, I would never pick up after somebody, an adult especially, no. My mum used to say, see those things on the side of your body? They're called arms, use them. So I don't pick up after people. What I would do in the case of this particular housemate is on cleaning day, I would gather all of his stuff into a pile in the lounge room and then leave it for him to sort. Then it was then out of the way. I mean, it was unsightly, but it's not my mess, it doesn't matter. And so there'd be this pile, he'd see it, he'd be really pissed off, because, you know, I've dumped all this stuff in a pile, and I'm like, it's not even supposed to be here. And so that's how I dealt with him. It didn't make him neat. He was never neat. He ended up marrying a girl who's equally as messy as him, and now they live in pigsty heaven, each to their own. It's not how I could live, but it's working for him to a degree. So if I had a husband who was messy, number one, I would not pick up after him at all. I would, for example, let's say he leaves all these jocks on the floor or his clothes in the bathroom on the floor. I would leave them there. They would stay there for an eternity until he picked them up and moved them into the washing machine. I am not going to be picking up your jocks or your socks or your wet towels or no. I would leave it, and then when he comes up to me and says, hey, I've run out of clothes, I'd say, well, that's because you forgot to put them in the washing machine. You know, you forgot to use your arms. I wouldn't do it for him. And if he never did it, well, I don't know how I'd deal with that. I probably wouldn't stay with somebody who was really messy. I think it would be what do you call that, a deal breaker for me. So the lady was saying things like, her husband leaves the cap off the toothpaste, for example. Easy resolve of that is buy separate toothpaste. Let him have his hard, crusty, cap left off toothpaste. And he can deal with that. If it bothers him, it bothers him. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But have your own. Separate it. She was saying that he'd thrown clothes at the bin. I guess he was trying to put them in the bin, but he missed. Or he did a 50-cent job, half-half, almost completed the job but didn't. If my husband did that, I would call him into the kitchen and I would say, I know you were aiming for the bin, but you missed. You might want to give it a second try. And then let him pick them up. And if he tried to walk away while he hadn't picked them up, I would probably block his way and say, come on, put the clothes in the bin. I know that you can do it, so I don't know. I mean, I guess my main thing would be to lead with a humour, a joke, as opposed to going, what the hell? Why aren't the clothes in the bin? That's just, no. I would humour it. I would turn it into something a bit more lighter, a bit more positive, and just see if that worked. I don't know what I would do if he just would leave the clothes near the bin and it was just going to stay there forever. I don't know how I would handle that. But I would be going up to him and saying, can you please do X, Y, Z? And in saying that, as a matter of fact, I do that with my husband. I'll say to him, hey babe, we give each other pet names. If I call him by his real name, he gets super offended anyway, right? So call him, hey babe, I need your muscles. Have you got a minute? And I don't do it when he's in the middle of watching TV and a sports game is on and he's hanging to see who's going to win and he's cheering and everything. I don't do it then. I wait until he's in the middle of something that's not as important or he's not in the middle of something at all. And I'll say, hey babe, I need your muscles, have you got a minute? And I'm praising him then. He's muscles, he's strong. I need your help. I'll say, hey Mr. Tall Man, because I'm short, he's tall. I need your help getting that thing up there high where I'm too short to reach. I'll say things like, strong man, tall man, Mr. Muscles, I need your guns. Those kinds of things. Things that let him know that he's the one that can do this job and not me. And again, it makes him feel a little bit appreciated because he realizes that he's the one that can do these things and I can't. And I approach him in a nice way, but very direct. So I don't sort of say, when are you going to get around to plastering the ceiling? I would say something along the lines of, hey babe, should we go down to the hardware store and buy some things for the ceiling today? And just see if he says yes or no. I mean, that being said, I've never mentioned the ceiling. I don't care. But in relation to something that I would need help with, like pruning a tree. I prune a tree and it's got this really big fat branch that I can't cut. I just don't have the strength. I would definitely say to him, can you please come out and help me with that? And he might be a bit annoyed if he's in the middle of something. And that's okay, I'll say, all right, we'll leave it for now. I don't stress about when he can do it in a sense, because I don't want to be going up to him and demanding, hey, do it now. I want to give him the space to say, well, I'm going to be ready in such a time. And I do try to get a sort of a time limit. So I'll say to him, hey, I need this lemon tree done, lemon tree pruned, for example. Can we get it done this week? And just see what he says. And then I might remind him, or I might get the pruners out and leave them in a visual spot, because my husband will see them and be like, what are they doing there? And then realise and then help out. So that's sort of how I get him to help out. Again, I don't know how I would go if he was really non-fixie. I think, for example, I might pay somebody else to do it. If it was like a really big job, say he started tiling, for example, and then just stopped partway through, I might pay somebody else to do it. But in saying that, if you have a husband or wife who starts jobs and then doesn't finish them, there's always a possibility that they could be somewhat bipolar, where you have that kind of, fabulous idea. I'm going to paint the walls today. I'm going to paint them bright orange. It's going to be amazing. And then you start in a corner and then you lose that sort of excitement. and then there's a half orange wall there forever. I have a friend who's like that, and her house is really, what do you call it, unique. It's little splodges of paint on the walls here and there and everything, because she has an idea, loses the effect, and then it just gets left. So there is a possibility that that could be a thing with partners who are doing that, just putting that out there. May be a thing, may not, just putting it out. So yeah, I would, if I was in situations where I needed somebody to do things, I ask politely, I praise them in a way that makes them feel that they're helpful, such as tall man, strong man, and I always thank them after. Thank you for doing the light for me, I really appreciate that. Thank you for getting that pot down from the top shelf. Always thank them. You want to make them feel valued, and that their contribution matters, and that they are appreciated for what they're bringing to the relationship. It's like what you do with children. Like, let's say you've got children and one of them is hitting another child, and you say to that child, stop hitting. And that child maybe keeps hitting a bit longer, and so you say it again, and then that child stops hitting. It's so important right in that moment to say, well done, that was good stopping. It's good to see that you stopped hitting that child, that's awesome. Instead of going, why were you hitting that child, what the hell, blah, 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 go to your room, you're naughty, blah, blah, blah. That's negative reinforcement. Whereas if you lead with a positive reinforcement, that could help. And the way that I see humans, this might be funny to some, odd funny, not humorous funny. We're all just little kids that are bigger. We still respond to the same stimuli. We still want to feel valued and welcome and loved. Even if you're on the spectrum and you don't show love, or it seems like you don't show love, everybody wants to be valued for who they are. For example, my son, he hates being complimented on his looks. It's not an achievement to him. He just was born that way. This is his face, you know, it is what it is. But if I compliment him on something he's really impressive at, he beams. He loves to hear that. Now, he's on the spectrum. So it's not that because he's on the spectrum he doesn't want any praise. It's that I have to find the praise that works for him, and we have to find the praise that works for each individual person. Then we have to make them feel valued and loved and adored and part of a contributing family. So hopefully that helps. If you have any more questions, please let me know below. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video.